Welcome back to Absolute Units. I'm Joe Vaughan, and my co-host is Dr. Ollie Douglas. This is our second attempt at recording this episode after unexpected technical difficulties upset the first time. This episode is just me and Ollie, and we're going to be reflecting on Radical Rural and Voices of the Countryside, a gallery trail and exhibition that both recently finished at the MERL. Both transformed our spaces and galleries through artworks, archives, objects, and even a giant to help us tell stories of the fight for access to England's green spaces and the need to care for its future. If you're a regular listener to the podcast, both the exhibition and the trail have been the focus of many of our recent episodes. And if you're a new listener, if you like this one, there's a ton for you to go back and check out. Also, we recorded this on the afternoon of Tuesday, 16th of June, the day after Cape Verde mightily drew against Spain. At the time of release, it's going to be Thursday, when England will hopefully have begun their World Cup campaign in glory by beating Croatia 20-0. This might come back to haunt me, but I won't be recording this for a third time. Enjoy the episode. So basically, what happened?
I think you just like chatting.
Well, what happened with that was we use a roadcaster to record, and it was quite slow at the end to finish saving, which seemed alarming. Normally, it's not. And then when I listened to it back in editing, it just every like 2 or 3 minutes, it would just speed run through about a minute of content, and it would just be a very fragmentary, incomplete, absurd conversation. And I just thought rather than trying to salvage that, we could just go from the top and do it again. And
that sounds good.
Yeah, I think so. And it's nice chatting. And actually, one thing we stated at the beginning of the lost podcast, as it were, was that it's very nice to be recording again, because we haven't really recorded in a moment.
Yeah, I was just reminded. I was looking this up. And AI has told me, the quote I'm looking for is, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. But I think we're doing the same thing.
Who's that by?
Well, it's attributed to Einstein, but I'm not entirely sure.
It's one of those quotes that could be attributed to Einstein or
Churchill. It's also kind of
of
inappropriate now. It is. I think sort of talking about mental health challenges in that way doesn't seem appropriate. But
no,
nevertheless, we're doing the same thing over and over again and expecting the same results because we just don't have the last version.
Yeah.
Or don't have the last version in its entirety.
Yeah.
But given that we can't actually remember what we really said last time,
so
it's going to be different.
Broadly, what we're going to be talking about in this episode is our recently closed gallery trail, Radical Rural, and our exhibition, Voices of the Countryside, 100 Years of the CPRE. And we had an amazing conversation about this in the aforementioned Lost episode. And one of the big things we talked about recurringly was this idea of what you called curated serendipity. So in the least serendipitous way possible, we're going to have that conversation all over again.
Yeah, it's just going to flow magically as if we haven't already had the conversation.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you for sticking with us.
Yeah. And
it's nice to be back, isn't it? Nice
to be back, and it's nice to be doing things the wrong way around again. Talking about something that you now can't come and see because it's no longer there. You can still come and see the galleries and see the museum and see other cool stuff. But
so we're doing the second episode about something that people can no longer come to.
Yeah,
but in a way, I think that will be part of the conversation.
Yeah,
that will crop up.
And curating serendipity as a concept, if it is a concept. It makes sense anyway. So come to the museum, encounter things, and and find that there are interesting stories that connect to you in your life.
Yeah. So kicking off this episode, I think probably the best place to begin is, what was the inspiration to produce Radical Rural and Voices of the Countryside? Like, what was the driver to do this work?
So we talked a little bit about this already on the podcast. This is a significant year for the Museum of English Rural Life. It's our 75th birthday year. It's a significant year for our wider institution, the University of Reading. It's the University of Reading's centenary. But the University of the Reading and its Royal Charter, that's not the only thing to happen in 1926. And in 1926, the Council for the Preservation of Rural England, CPRE, was established as well.
And what is CPRE?
So back in 1926, this is between the two world wars. It's in the aftermath of staggering global conflict. It's a period of enormous change for the English countryside in terms of aristocratic homes that are no longer viable and affordable, big changes to food and farming, the challenges of food security that have been experienced during the First World War, the looming threat, potentially, of war again, conflict coming twice in a generation and bringing similar kinds of staggering change. This is an important period. It's also an important period in terms of other shifts and changes. So farming is becoming increasingly mechanized. Motoring, so using your cars, getting out into the countryside. There are far more people accessing and using the countryside. There's greater demand for access to green space for leisure pursuits in this same period as well. If you add to that ribbon development, which is the sort of expansion of urban centres in sort of tentacle-like ribbons stretching out into the countryside along trunk roads and A roads and sort of main routes into those urban centres, that's coming about because of sort of suburban expansion, peri-urban expansion, but also the rise of commuter culture. So wealthy middle-class people, stockbrokers and professionals who can afford to live in a house alongside an A road, but out into the countryside where they have nice green views of green rolling hills, but then hop in their car and drive into town for their day job. So that's come in. As well as that, other eyesores alongside the road are prevalent. So billboards and advertising, there's no particular control of what people can stick in their fields or beside hedges or nail to a tree. So all of that kind of stuff is causing visual clutter.
And the rise of litter as well, I suppose.
Yeah, and that's what CPRE and other organisations at the time would have referred to as unburnable rubbish. So in the 1920s, or up until that point, or around that time, essentially you've got two kinds of rubbish. You've got rubbish that you throw away and it biodegrades, so banana skins and apple cores, that kind of thing, the tail end of a half-eaten sandwich. And then you've got rubbish that you burn. You sort of keep hold of it and then you have a bonfire and you get rid of it that way. But the rise of packaging, so food packaging and sort of packaging of goods in that sort of early 20th century period is staggering. So suddenly you have far more things that are produced in unrecyclable, unbiodegradable materials, glass and particular forms of paper. And that stuff is just chucked. It's just chucked on the side of the road, beauty spots in sort of scenic places. And so those places are no longer quite so beautiful or quite so scenic. So this is sort of rise of litter culture and a reaction to that.
Amazing.
So I guess a good follow-up to that is the fact that CPRE isn't actually the UK's oldest conservation body. It's been running for 100 years, but we also hold the archives of the Open Spaces Society. So this was the merging of a couple of organisations, including the Commons and Footpath Society, and that as a sort of set of campaign processes and institutional processes dates back to the 1860s. So we've got conservation practice that dates back as far as the mid-19th century, represented in the archives here. So telling those kinds of stories seems like a sort of critical extension of some of the conversations that we've been having about nature connectivity, about how to think about landscapes and the future of England's landscapes now.
It's interesting that both of those, both the idea of litter and of the Open Spaces Society connects to the work of Katrina Navikas, who we spoke to on the podcast, because Katrina was here as a fellow, an Open Spaces Society fellow, is that right? Open
Spaces Society Research Fellow, yeah. So she looked at some of the lantern slides, particularly of the Open Spaces Society collection, and tried to locate them, find the spaces, the places that they depict, and map them. And she's written about that and sort of built on that work in her Contested Commons book that we've spoken to her about in the past.
Yeah. And so I guess, is it really the significance of the charity, the fact that it's their centenary, and the strength of the materials we have that led to the exhibition forming?
Yeah, so it was essentially, many of our colleagues have been focusing on the other big centenary, the story of the university and its 100 years of development and change. And they've been producing lots of exciting content and programming related to that. When CPRE approached us about the possibility of an exhibition, I agreed to take that on. So it's an exhibition that probably in another year might have been something that our archive colleagues and library colleagues would have taken on, because the collections largely sit in the archive and the library rather than the sort of museum object collections that I'm responsible for. But it's a really important organization, and its story runs right the way through the kinds of collections that we have more broadly. It runs right the way through some of the ways in which we engage with and think about those collections now. Why are they important? What's significant about them? How does it connect to contemporary rural issues? All of those are things that CPRE continue to campaign on and continue to talk about. So returning to that 1926 moment, revisiting it in the context of campaigns and sort of coalescing ideas about rural radicalism in that period and drawing that right forward to the contemporary story seemed like a really important and significant thing to be involved in.
Well, you've basically introduced the next question, which was, very, very neatly through rural radicalism. How did that then link into the Radical Rural Gallery Trail? And what is the concept of a gallery trail for listeners who are maybe less familiar with how museums operate?
So our gallery trails offer us an opportunity to stretch temporary content through a space that otherwise feels a bit more fixed and permanent. So we have galleries that were laid out, most of them in 2016, when we did a big redevelopment program. And we had fixed displays designed with content that we tend not to change very much. We've changed a couple of gallery spaces, or we've tweaked a little bit here and there, but broadly speaking, those galleries remain the same. You get the same stories, the same content, the same material. So partly as a way of acknowledging that we have return visitors. People don't just come once. So if you haven't been, you can come once, and then you can come again and again and again and enjoy those displays over and over. So partly as a way of acknowledging that people come back, and they might want a sort of slightly different story or a little bit of a sort of different experience. These gallery trails offer us a way of slightly changing the story or drawing out a particular thread that connects through those spaces, or telling a story or a set of stories that we didn't manage to include wholesale in those redisplays back in 2016. They're also a really nice way of getting just a little bit more of the vast swathes of reserve material, the stored material, out into the gallery spaces, into gallery drawers, into other bits of those fixed displays. And they allow us to connect something that we're talking about elsewhere in the museum spaces. So, for example, the story of CPRE through to those main fixed permanent galleries as well, even if we're not talking a great deal in the original interpretation about CPRE and its affiliates. So there's a whole host of reasons why having a gallery trail through those spaces is a good idea for us. Most people tend to think about gallery trails in terms of family activity or trails that are produced for children.
And the rat trail.
And we have really quite iconic and successful equivalents here at the MERL. But this is a little bit different. This is catering to the kind of audience who might come to see an exhibition with slightly more sort of mature content, or that's the wrong way of putting that.
No.
Not mature content.
No.
Yeah.
Whenever we do an event and say this is 18 plus, it sounds...
Yeah, I can't say adult content.
Adult content, no.
Yeah, I don't think this will go.
It's not an adult content trail. No.
Yeah. So this is a way for us to cater to different sets of audiences other than families and children, who also might appreciate a particular targeted route through the galleries, or a way to navigate those spaces with a little bit of direction.
So what actually was the content in Radical Rural then? And how did that come together, and what brought it together as well? What similarities?
So the other nice thing about being approached by CPRE and having this excuse to talk about campaigns and activity connected to rural green space, connected to nature connectivity, connected to access to the countryside, is that there are a whole host of other organisations in the contemporary rural English space who are talking about all of these ideas and issues now, whether that's in connection to the right to roam, so greater access to bits of rural England, or rewilding, so ideas about nature recovery and sort of bringing about a greater return of biodiversity. All of these organizations are ones that we're really interested in working with or telling the story of or finding an excuse to talk about in these gallery spaces, and use the collections we hold, which are about the past, to talk about contemporary and future challenges and issues. So it was a great excuse to not only tell the story of CPRE and related historical organizations that still play a part in those conversations today, but also in a way echo the origins of CPRE and do something that's about bringing together a whole series of different activist voices in the present. So CPRE back in 1926 was originally a council. It's now the Campaign to Protect Rural England.
It's worth pointing out that all of their names have the same, begin with the same letters.
Same acronym.
They're variations of names.
Yeah, but originally it was the Council for the Preservation of Rural England. So it was a council, and a council is a coming together of different voices.
A chorus.
Yeah, a coalition. So
a confederation.
A confederate, yeah.
Choir.
Lots, yeah.
Church. Church should be too loaded. What else?
Community. Collective.
Collective's nice, isn't it?
Conversation.
The congregation.
A co-production. Like this.
Conga line.
A conga line.
Conga line.
Yeah, the conga line of the CPRE.
The conga line for the protection of Rural England is what we could have called the Gallery Trail.
Yeah. Well, that would have been good.
Yeah.
We should have done that.
Yeah, damn.
Yeah.
But if only we could do that again, like we're recording this podcast.
Yeah. Well,
it would have had less interesting branding, though.
We are destined to be doing things over and over again now.
We've gone off piste, but I feel like the branding that we had for Radical Rural was really, really nice as well. And I'm sure we'll put a link on the show notes to the webpage. But yeah, the designer, Studio Noom, we worked with, did a beautiful job of making a very beautiful, mysterious onion-ish graphic. That doesn't really sell it. It kind of is. It's like a spooky onion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It does make sense in the context of things, because the word radical stems from the word root.
Yeah.
And this idea of ideas taking root and multiple layers and lots of different voices. And yeah.
Yeah, so speaking of those voices, shall we just do a quick loop?
Very quick.
A quick loop.
Last time round, I rambled on and
Last
on
time
and
it
on.
wasn't a quick loop. But
Joe was nodding off in his chair.
I wasn't nodding off. That's libelous. No, I was listening very keenly. It was fascinating.
It won't be this time.
Well, Jesus.
It's hard. He's heard me before.
I've heard you many times. Would you pass me the other one so I can have one as well?
Yeah. So we have in front of us the paper trail that was produced. There. Sound effect. Yeah. That's Joe unfolding his trail.
And it has a lovely... So on one side we have the gallery trail. On the other side, the reverse, we have a poster from the CPRE archive, which says, "Guard the countryside." And it's a giant fist holding a sword over a sort of... I guess like a would you say a pastiche or like a quilt of different scenes of rural England?
Yeah, on the right behind the sword is a kind of rather idyllic agricultural landscape with some Holstein dairy cattle in a nice green field and some green hills, a nice clear blue sky. And it's a sort of, that's the ideal that CPRE are fighting to guard. And on the left, on the other side of the sword, are lots of factories spewing out smoke into darkened green landscapes and a sky that's full of billowing clouds of pollution.
Satanic mills.
Yeah, dark satanic mills. So this is a 1960s poster that's in the archive that gives you a sense of some of the things that they're worrying about mid-20th century. They're worrying about increased industrial production and the impact of that on the environment. So early conversations about environmental impacts of industry, of pollution, of things that we think about as very contemporary conversations, very poly-crisis, kind of environmental climate change kind of conversations, but things that CPRE and other conservation and preservation organizations have been interested in for a long time.
I love that the poster at the bottom says, "Send CPRE the funds for the fight." It's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's motivating.
Yeah. And you can still send them money, of course.
Yeah, we'll put a link to their website in the show notes. Yeah, you can join.
Yeah.
Okay, so would you read the intro text at the top of the leaflet, Ollie?
So the Gallery Trail leaflet reads, "Your radical rural journey begins here. This trail explores the stories of many people who have fought for nature, access, and a rural England where all are welcome. From artists to academics and singers to sign makers, follow our diverse band of mischief makers and add your voice to the radical rural choir."
Lovely stuff.
Yeah.
Very nicely written.
Yeah. Did you write that?
I think we wrote it together.
Yeah.
Okay,
a conversation, a coalition.
It was a coalition.
Yeah.
It was
co-production.
A co-production.
Excellent.
Yeah. Okay, so the trail begins in our Shaping the Land gallery. What did we have in there?
So we started with one of the earliest minute books of the Open Spaces Society, so that early conservation body. And that was in a way just to root things in the history and to say there's other material here in the wider collections that connect to these kinds of themes and campaigns. And from there, we launched straight into contemporary art. We had some work by Rob and Harriet Fraser, who are Somewhere Nowhere, is what they operate under the name.
Although this afternoon they're at the Museum of English Rural Life, aren't they?
They are coming to pick up the artwork that they had in that space, which was artwork that was produced as a part of a project called Sense of Place. So Rob and Harriet work in the Lake District, and they'd worked in the Lake District National Park. So one of our national landscapes, a key iconic national landscape that's been part of the conversations about protecting place since we first started talking about protecting place in this country. And they did an amazing artwork that was a photographic piece and a sort of word poem piece, fell poems, these short texts on a huge canvas that they suspended in various locations around the Lake District National Park. We had that huge canvas in the galleries welcoming people to the space and welcoming people to the gallery trail.
And after that point, it's on to You're on the Farm, and the stop was called A Brush with Nature.
So this is the work of local landscape artist Anna Dillon, and Anna produces these rather striking and bold, colourful artworks that capture the essence of particular landscapes and views and perspectives. She very kindly lent us a piece from her own collection of her work, but also borrowed a piece back from some local people who had bought a piece of her work. And that second piece that she borrowed back was really important because the artwork itself ended up on the cover of the hard copy version of Guy Shrubsole's Lie of the Land. Now, those of you who've listened to us before might have heard the episodes with Guy Shrubsole.
And all the other episodes where we talk about Guy Shrubsole.
Yeah. And we were talking about his book, Lie of the Land. The hardcover version of that had this brilliant painting by Anna on it. So we had that painting in the space, and we also had in a gallery drawer elsewhere in the space work by Guy Shrubsole, so that we're drawing these stories together and a chance to see the artwork beside the literature.
And they were also joined in the space by a real celebrity, an MVP, which was Old Crocken. Old Crocken was overlooking that gallery.
Yeah, and we've talked obviously to Lisa Schneider and Ruth Webb about Old Crocken and told that story.
The spirit of Dartmoor.
A story, as with all good stories, that Guy Shrubsole was bound up in as well. So, all of these things connect. And in the gallery drawer with Guy's work, we had a map made by Materiality that mapped the sort of ownership of Dartmoor. So this is a sort of contemporary map used as a form of protest. And on the cover of the map, Old Crockern. So all of these things interconnect, and sometimes you can judge a book or a map by its cover. You can tell that it's going to be good.
I'm just going to pause and listen back to make sure it's all fine. I feel like when a footballer breaks their leg and then goes back out to play and is a bit cautious.
Does that happen?
Well, footballers break their legs.
Do they then go out to play again?
Oh, eventually.
Oh, once their legs heal, not straight away.
Not straight away. In the deep end.
Yeah.
But you can get a real hard kick of the ball with a cast on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me just pause this now and listen back. Okay, we're back. It's all good.
It is all good.
It's all good. I don't know if that will stay in.
What? Saying it's all good?
Saying it's all good. Or even that.
It might not be good.
I quite like the bit about it might not be good. So the next stop is in our town and country gallery. And the blurb says, "Stomp for nature and get creative with Reading's Fobney Martians." So if you go back, we did an episode with Adrian Lawson, the sort of
it's just an
leading iconic Martian. Yeah. So Fobney Martian is a
if that doesn't make sense, go back and listen to the episode, and it will make sense.
Yeah. You'll leave agreeing with us. But yeah, Fobney Marsh is a local marshland in Reading that's looked after by a community group called the Fobney Martians, who organise together and have just this amazing calendar of sort of volunteering and socialising, and it's extraordinary stuff. But since we spoke to Adrian, Ollie and I have been to the marsh. Yeah. And I have been in the marsh.
I'd already been in the marsh, and Joe actually had wet feet though this time. Literally in the marsh. He's got marsh boggy feet.
Yeah.
How was that?
Well, I think I got the full package that way.
Yeah,
I wasn't shortchanged. It really is wet.
Oddly, in the gallery trail, the moment we celebrate is the winter solstice stomping from the 21st of December last year, where various local arts activists supported the Fobney Martians by producing a series of pennant banners and flags that they hung around the marsh for this mass stomping event. And these flags we were lucky enough to borrow and suspend in the gallery space. So they were sort of nice visual feature in the gallery trail. And it was incredibly wet. It was so wet, in fact, that day that they couldn't stomp the bit that they had planned to stomp. We had to stomp somewhere slightly different. When Joe and I visited recently, the marsh is a completely different landscape.
It was the heat wave.
Yeah, we walked right the way through that section of the marsh, and it was actually quite dry. So Joe sought out possibly the only bits of water in the marsh. And
I was just testing it.
Yeah, managed to get his foot wet. So, he didn't...
My Asics running shoes that I wore were not suitable.
Yeah. Well, I think they were fine. Have they survived?
They were fine. Oh yeah, they've lived. Yeah.
Yeah, they've lived. Yeah. They've lived. They've got stories to tell.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, speaking of stories to tell, the next stop is called Speaking for the Trees.
And this is a stop that connects to something that's permanently on display in the galleries. So we have some clothes worn by the environmental protester Jim Hindle, when he was protesting against the Newbury bypass road construction in the 1990s. And Jim Hindle lived up a tree called Middle Oak for many, many months as part of this protest, which was about protecting trees, protecting ancient landscapes and ancient forest, protecting heritage sites, all of which lay in the pathway for this new road construction. The road construction, of course, went ahead, so Newbury Bypass does exist. But the stories and resonance of that moment of anti-roads protest continue to resonate throughout those sort of campaign organisations and conversations today. So there are many people who can chart a link back to that moment of protest and those sort of mid-90s conversations about landscape protection and environmental protection, including, of course, Guy Shrubsole, who grew up in Newbury. So he was relatively young when these protests were taking place, but was inspired by them, I think, in terms of his future career and work. But also the amazing local writer, Nicola Chester. Nicola was there at the protests. She writes about it in her memoir, On Gallows Down, which is one of the things that we included in the gallery displays. But we also included a cartoon book by Kate Evans. Now, Kate Evans at the time was a Guardian journalist, but unusually for a journalist, she was a cartoon journalist. So she recorded and captured the experience of being an environmental protester as part of those anti-roads protests in a series of cartoons for the Guardian, which later were collected together along with other work into it's like a graphic novel sort of memoir called Cops, but it's also a how-to book. So there are amazing cartoons in there that teach you how to build a treehouse. So the kind of treehouse that Jim Hindle would have lived in, how to safely climb a tree in protest, how to dig yourself a tunnel and sort of bed in to try and resist bulldozers and construction.
Wow. Amazing stuff. So the next stop on the trail actually is about the country code, but I want to skip ahead because after that is a section called On Littering and Lettering, and it's about the beautiful work of Man in the Woods. So would you talk a little bit about what we've got by Man in the Woods in there, or what we had rather by Man in the Woods in the trail?
So Man in the Woods, some of you may recognize the name. He's joined us on the podcast in the past, so go back and listen to those episodes.
Or check out his amazing Instagram account. And I will try to remember to put it in the show notes. But if you listen and we haven't put it in the show notes, please hold us to account and tell us that we haven't put it in the show notes, because that's something we need to do more.
Yeah. And in keeping with the idea of wandering a linear path through the galleries of the Museum of English Rural Life, the amazing thing about Man in the Woods and his practice is essentially that he goes on a sort of long and rambling peripatetic wander through the English countryside. He started one Friday, and then he got a bus home at the end of his walk, and then he went back to where he got on the bus and started that same walk again the following Friday. And he's been going on these Friday walks ever since. And as he goes on these Friday walks, he encounters strange and unusual things in villages and rural communities.
Like the Museum of English Rural Life.
Yeah. And those things inspire him to create artworks and posters and sort of the thing that struck me about his work, these amazing sort of anti-dog poo posters that are playing off the idea of children and people in villages creating their own posters and campaigns to try and stop people from littering the countryside, is that they use a brilliant combination of visuals, but also typography. So the sort of graphic typefaces in there in his work really reminded me of some of the early 1920s campaign work that was involved in those early anti-litter campaigns by organizations like CPRE and related organizations.
And what was the name of one of the related organizations?
So one of the related organizations was called Pug Pups, which is the Pick Up Glass Society, Pick Up Paper Society, Pug Pups.
Pug Pups.
Yeah.
Bring them back.
Yeah, another really significant body around about the same time that's really more about billboards than litter is called SCAPA, which was the Society for Checking the Abuses in Public Advertising. They're one of the many different bodies that came together to form the Council for the Preservation of Rural England. So SCAPA are in there, the National Trust are in there, the Open Spaces Society are in there. You know, anyone who's anyone is a sort of founder member organisation of CPRE.
As we sort of move on in the trail, it becomes really clear that actually the trail is doing a very similar job to the CPRE and bringing together this diverse choir of different voices and activists and authors and creatives. Because the next stop is called Love, Land and Labour, about farmer protests.
So we have on display in the galleries, and we've had it since a previous gallery trail and intervention, protest placard from the November 2024 farm protests made by Helen Rebanks. And Helen Rebanks and her husband, James Rebanks, are both farmers and writers. So in a gallery drawer nearby, we had James's English Pastoral, one of the books that he's written about experiences in trying to bring about nature recovery on the family farm in the Lake District. And alongside his book, we had some work that connected to the museum itself. So work by J.C. Nyala, who did a project about allotments called 1918 Allotment. So again, taking us back to that earlier in the century moment or early last century moment and connecting it through to contemporary conversations about allotments through her poetry work and research. Alongside those, there were some bits and pieces from the Land Workers Alliance and some material connected to the Oxford Real Farming Conference, which is the big sort of showcase conference for the UK's agroecology movement, which brings together, again, a hugely diverse range of voices who are interested in a more nature-sympathetic way of farming and producing food.
So, next up was 3 Acres and a Cow.
3 Acres and a Cow.
Yeah.
The brilliant Robin Gray. So 3 Acres and a Cow, for those of you who have not experienced it, is an amazing musical performance that tells the story of land rights and land access and exclusion from the Norman conquest to the present day. And it's a hugely important performance because it's been touring for probably coming on for 14 years now. And the way they tell that story is through what Robin has called the washing line of history, which is quite literally a washing line on which they hang these vignettes, these moments in that incredible timeline. And each one becomes a jumping off point for song and performance and reflection. And Robin was kind enough to allow us to, I'm not sure borrow is the right word, but to display the washing line of history in the galleries. So we displayed it relatively close to the plaster cast of the hands of Joseph Arch, who is an iconic agricultural labouring union member and politician who had impacts in these kind of conversations in the late 19th century. And it was there for the duration of the gallery trail. Slightly surprising to come into the galleries and encounter a washing line with lots of dates and a timeline.
And at our Radical Rural event, we were joined by Three Eggs and a Cow, who got the room singing along to their songs, and it was just magic having people singing at the MERL.
And it was a great example, I guess, of that same idea and principle of curating serendipity, in that it brought lots of people together who perhaps might have been in the same spaces before. So for example, we've mentioned Jim Hindle, we've mentioned Guy Shrubsole, we've mentioned Nicola Chester, all of whom were connected in some way to those protests in Newbury in the 1990s, but probably weren't familiar with each other until coming together at this event.
So we haven't actually talked about the idea of curating serendipity in this episode. We had in the last one.
You talked about it at the beginning.
Yeah, but I said we're going to talk about it.
Oh, okay.
But we haven't talked about it yet.
Okay. So
but
serendipitously.
Serendipitously, Ollie. What do you mean by curating serendipity? What does that mean to you in the context of the trailing exhibition?
Yeah, I guess this sort of popped into my head partly last time when we were talking about these same things, but it's been rumbling along in my mind that museum spaces are great for bringing people together around stuff and around ideas, and that's a powerful tool. It means that we can get different like-minded individuals together. We can get people who are poles apart, and we can put them in a space around stuff and around stories that might inspire them. And if they then take away from that some form of new connection, then, we've somehow brought about a little bit of serendipity. And I think that happens in lots of different ways when you have huge numbers of people in the same space who all have joined in, to an event that they've been particularly invited to. So that Radical Rural and Voices of the Countryside celebration event was a great example of that. And people who hadn't met before coming together for the first time and finding a connection, people who had met but hadn't seen each other for many years.
I think also, it's that cross-pollination of ideas and knowledge. It feels like it becomes more than the sum of its parts, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just thinking about the World Cup, which obviously is happening right now. And I listen to loads of football podcasts, and I heard someone saying about I think Cape Verde played Spain or drew with Spain last night. And someone said...
Did you watch the footage?
I only watched the end of the game.
I watched the highlights of the saves.
Absolutely
just
phenomenal.
Extraordinary saves.
Absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like a little, I think there's a 10 island nation playing.
They've got a population of 400,000.
Yeah.
And they just held their own against Spain so much. But I saw on this podcast, people, they were saying that, the Cape Verde players, just through the discipline and the way they played, became so much more than the sum of, their individual players. I mean, it was just a mind-blowing performance. And I guess that's kind of the same thing with these kinds of bringing people together around, whether it's museum collections or a cause. People get energized and excited, and that things build from there.
Yeah, and I think the way Radical Rural came about is that it's a whole series of people that I've met and other colleagues have met over years and years, and some of them were people we'd met very recently, and it just sort of somehow fell together at that moment. These were things that we could get hold of, or we could borrow, or we could invite to be part of the display. We fired off messages to to those involved in Old Crockern, and they'd come back positive, but maybe the dates weren't going to work because Old Crockern might have had other commitments, and but luckily it all worked out, and Robin was enthusiastic about us sharing the washing line of history, and obviously we already had Jim Hindle's clothes on display and the protest placard on display, so there are little hooks that are already there in the gallery space. But there's so much more we can draw out of the wider reserve collections. And every time you're looking at that material, there are connections to make in terms of contemporary protests and activists.
And it felt like it grew and grew and grew. I mean, as I sort of worked with Ollie in the background a bit on bringing it all together, and mostly on the copy editing of the trail and the panels. But
Joe's got a sort of look of a shivering wreck that he's been traumatized by the experience of my chaotic ways of working. Curating serendipity is really just a description for a slightly unfettered chaos.
As opposed to my way of working, where we record the podcast twice in 2 weeks.
Yeah. Between the two of us, we managed to get something out.
But it really did feel that, the roots of this thing were growing and expanding, and more people were coming along, and more conversations were happening, and I could almost see. I think from emails that I was looped into, I could see an email about one thing was looping into another, and it was really growing in quite in a really interesting, organic way.
Yeah, and I think what's nice about this gallery trail, and also about sort of reigniting that relationship with CPRE, both at a national level and also with the local Berkshire committees of CPRE, is that it's not something that's an end in itself. We haven't done this display and then that's job done and we'll move on and next topic. But actually those conversations are ongoing.
Well, hold that thought. Do you want to talk about anything else that's in here? Because we could, for listeners, we have a fairly tight schedule with this because Ollie has to go at 2:30 and we're recording now when we've got 20 minutes. So do you want to chat
we could do a quick rattle through some of the other partners, and then so just almost like a list.
Let's do that, because we have more information on our website as well. So there's more information we can point to for people, and I think some of these people as well who we won't be able to cover in as much depth, we would like to bring on the podcast anyway, so we can give them.
Yeah, so following on from 3 Acres and a Cow, alongside that material, we had Katrina Navicasi's book. Alongside that was another book on the Commons by Stephen Elcock and Leah Gordon. Leah Gordon's an artist who's used MERL objects in some of her sort of photo collage artworks. And we had a slideshow later in the trail of some of her work that she'd produced for Coventry Biennale. We also had a good deal of material that revisited the Fobney Martians in connection with their featuring, or rather Adrian featuring, as part of a book called Wild Service. And Wild Service is a book produced by a couple of members of Right to Roam, key figures, Nick Hayes and John Moses. And Nick Hayes and John Moses in Wild Service tell us how we can better connect in small ways with the natural world and the world around us. Sort of acts of wild service that they describe. And one of the examples is the work of Adrian Lawson in Fobney Marsh. So sort of drawing those stories together alongside greater focus on that wider Right to Roam campaign and movement that we've talked so much about on the podcast, and I'm sure we'll continue to talk about in the future. We also had artwork by the artist Becky Lyon, and Becky's work is about sensory engagements with nature. So connectivity through art and the senses, in particular tactile engagement. So this is a difficult thing for us to grapple with in a museum gallery trail where we're sticking things behind glass and out of contact with people. But that's a sort of tension that Becky was up for playing with and sort of playing around with. So we're enormously grateful to her for lending a small bit of her ongoing research and work to the displays, and actually connecting it to the story of the museum, quite interestingly. We also had material from Wildcard, who are a campaign organisation campaigning for the sort of rewilding of space in England and Wales.
And the Ghost Woods.
Yeah, so one of their campaigns is based around this idea of rewilding the Ghost Woods. So this is where there are the vestiges and hidden sort of hints of ancient woodland lying perhaps underneath modern forestry commission planting or in other spaces and places. So we had some of the campaign materials from that work. There are also people who have in the past worked with Ruth Webb from Lost Giants. They have a giant called Mal, the lemon slug. We didn't borrow Mal. We only had one giant at a time.
One giant is enough, I think, for one museum.
Yeah, at a time.
At a time, yeah.
That's not to say
every museum should have at least one, but more than one is...
Maybe Mal could come another time.
Yeah.
It's just
but all giants are welcome.
Yeah.
And you don't need to book.
Yeah. And you might even get a greeting from our lovely colleague Sharon as
Old Crocken
did. Yeah, check out the TikTok videos.
Yeah.
We had a poster from Greenham Common. So we have a poster in the collections that's a sort of 1 year on from the Greenham Common Peace Camp protests. They produced this poster to celebrate that moment back in the early 1980s. And Greenham Common is one of those protest places and sites that's played a part not only obviously in the campaign for nuclear disarmament and conversations about global peace, and disarmament more broadly, but also in connection to conversations about open space. It's a common, and that common once the missiles left the site and it was reopened up, became a common once again, and is now a sort of natural open space.
We haven't really talked about nuclear missiles.
No, we haven't. No, but we could do that
at some point.
Yeah. That would be a good thing to follow up on, I think, and talk about more deeply.
I'm going to Greenham Common this week.
Oh, right. Yeah. Well, there's an organisation there called 101 Arts, and they're a group that we've worked with a little bit in the past, and it'd be great to work with them again in the future. And in fact, Simon Chatterton from 101 Arts was there at the Radical Rural event. So lots of connections.
All these things link back.
Yeah.
So after that, we had Enclosed Past Exposed, which was about Leah Gordon's work.
Yeah, so I talked a little bit about that already. And then we had some amazing photographs from a broader series of work about the South Downs National Park and people who work and live in that space by the amazing and powerful photographer Anne-Katrine Perkis. And the sort of culminating moment of the gallery trail, halfway down the wagon walk. So for those of you who've never been, this is quite literally a gallery that's full of wagons, just huge farm wagons.
Which was curated by Adam Kazari, wasn't it?
I think it was.
Back in the day.
Yeah, he was Wagon Man, wasn't
he? From our first episode of this podcast, we chatted to former curator / social media manager, Adam Kazari.
Yeah, he did the wagons and the plows. I don't know whether he's still into wagons, but we should ask him.
We should have him on.
Let's have him on again and interrogate him about wagons. Yeah.
Wagon Man.
Yeah. Halfway down the wagon.
Wagon's Den.
Yeah. Okay. What's the concept there?
Pitch your wagon.
Okay.
I mean, that kind of works, doesn't it?
It's like paint your wagon. Pitch your wagon. Yeah. Okay. And but what's the actual concept? People come and sit around wagons and then get offered money for startup.
Have a biscuit, a cup of tea.
At the opening, the first public opening of the museum in 1955, the dignitaries sat in one of the wagons. There are photographs of them sitting in one of the wagons.
Wow.
So one of them was the then director of the V&A. One of them was the chancellor of the university. Is important.
I think that should be like a retirement ceremony. You get taken out of the museum in one of the wagons.
Well, they're used in funerary contexts.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So at least one of the wagons in the galleries we talk about in relation to use as a sort of funeral cart.
Right, I didn't realise that.
And sometimes it's sometimes something that people in farming communities still do is sort of have the coffin transported on a farm wagon.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
anyway, sorry, we were talking about Andy Parker.
Yeah, we hadn't even mentioned Andy Parker. We got halfway down the wagon walk and then went off on a wagon tangent.
Went
Easily done.
Went off track.
Off track, yeah. So halfway down the wagon walk, we had an amazing display of artwork by Andy Parker, who's a contemporary artist who we've worked with in the past. And in fact, his previous work with us was with the wagons. So this was when we were sort of moving collections around, ready for the redisplay that reopened in 2016, Andy came with a body of work that was about shipping containers and the movement of goods. And he was interested in sort of maritime trade, but also how that connected to rural England. And his way of building those links was through transport within England, so sort of terrestrial transport on wagons. And he made these extraordinary cardboard boxes using the sort of dimensions of shipping containers, and strapped them to the back of some of our wagons. And each of these cardboard boxes was painted in the pigments of the soils of the place where the wagon itself had been made. So this idea of goods and services flowing around the world in market capitalist systems being rooted in place, being rooted in very specific landscapes and sort of contexts of resource extraction. And essentially the work that was displayed as part of Radical Rural was an extension of that same idea, except this time realised through the medium of gates. And Andy has made the most extraordinary series of sculptures of rusting farm gates. And they look incredibly realistic, but they're actually made of cardboard and tape and paint and wood rather than rusting metal. And they're tied together with what looks like, at first glance, baler twine. So that sort of iconic orange plastic twine that you get a lot of in countryside contexts, but is actually Andy's sort of version of baler twine made out of recycled plastic bags. And these recycled sort of sculptures and gates are referential not only to landscapes being both enclosed and opened up through gateways. So gateways play a part in fencing and shutting off landscape and space, and they can be easily locked and padlocked. But they're also routes into landscapes. So they have that dual purpose. So there's an interesting tension going on there. But the gates are something that he made, I think, for the first time for a display with an artist collective in a large disused factory site on the coast of Portugal. So it was again about this connection between things that would have been flowing into that factory site from maritime trade routes or flowing out from their produce and products from the factory, and how that money and wealth accrued in the factory site then impacts on the local landscape, on enclosing that space and on developing and using that space. The gates are referential to that sort of meeting point.
But it's interesting because the wagon walk leads out of the galleries as well. To have sort of, what's the word, like strangely contorted gates up along the wall as an exit. And
actually the wagon walk was built like a cart shed. So it has these giant doors down one side of it, which originally were designed to bring the wagons into the building, and then the doors were shut, and they've sort of been sealed shut ever since. It's a sort of, the wagons will never be allowed outside again kind of situation. But, it actually has gateways right the way down the side of the building.
Well, that's a fitting place, I think, to talk about what you came on to earlier, and I said hold it back, which is about, what next? What next for Radical Rural?
Well, I think we've already been out to the marsh with Adrian, and we took a couple of colleagues with us. There's hopefully going to be another follow-up visit with some other colleagues. I think there are probably any number of people who were involved in this project or who featured in the gallery trail or in CPRE in the exhibition, who we might want to invite to talk to us on the podcast.
But what about I suppose the actual trail itself, the trail is done and gone, I guess.
It's done and gone in some
but it also
ways,
lives on.
Yeah, it's brought material into the collections as well. So some of the material that was on display in the gallery trail was drawn from existing collections. Some of it's material that we've acquired relatively recently. So those posters by Man in the Woods. Some of it's material that wasn't yet part of the collections, but will become part of the collections. So Catapult that Adrian Lawson made in connection with sort of rewilding Fobney Marsh, some seed bombs that he made. Robin Gray has very kindly allowed us to retain a copy of the washing line of history for the archives. So material from that will actively shape an add to the archive and collection here in the museum. And it's also a jumping off point. It's a jumping off point for us to think, I think, a little bit more seriously about where nature fits into the collections here at the museum. And I think we've talked a little bit about this in the past, that, essentially these are collections that speak to the brutalization of nature and the extraction from nature. And we have the conversations about the people involved in doing work in country spaces. We have the tools and technologies used to do that work, but we lack the plants and animals and the sort of the wildness and the animatedness in between. And I think this gallery trail has made us grapple with some of those questions and connections and conversations a little bit more actively. So whether this means Joe and I will be out in the countryside playing an active role in rural campaigns and protests, I don't know. But at the very least, some of that dynamic, active conversation can become part of the work that we do in the museum as well. And what, Joe, do you want the legacy of Radical Rural to be from your perspective?
I think it's been amazing just engaging with so many different voices, different speakers, different creative people and organizations doing such powerful and necessary work in rural England today. And I think I'd just love us to keep doing that. And I think that's what I mean about the trail having ended. It's, what do we keep from what we've learned, and how do we sort of embed that? And if we going right back to the sort of visual metaphor of the onion and its roots, how do we sort of keep nurturing that? How do we keep building on this seed and keep it growing, rather than the risk of I think of museum work, but also kind of all creative work is you do a project and then it sort of ceases to be. And I think I would love us to keep doing it. And I think it's the what we're hoping to achieve with the podcast and the digital work we do. I hope we can keep talking about these stories and keep it going that way.
The good thing about working with creative people and amazingly dynamic people who are committed to what they do is they carry on doing it. So, we mentioned Nick Hayes earlier. He has a book coming out later this year. Nicola will continue to write. Guy seems to churn out a book every year that's, each one slightly more impactful than the last and probably resonates. The Martians
will keep stomping.
Exactly.
And I suppose perhaps the chorus will keep singing.
Yeah, and museums like ours don't go away. The galleries have been sitting here for 10 years now. This October we'll have had those fixed displays for 10 years. They're ripe for rethinking, and some of these are the stories that should be in there in more fixed ways and ongoing ways. Not necessarily that we kill the dynamism and excitement and radicalism of contemporary protest organizations and conversations, but we echo that and provide a space for them to continue to be part of our conversations with our audiences moving forward.
And to resonate. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess
we keep it going. We do our bit to keep it going.
We take that amazing layered onion Radical Rural logo that Studio Noon produced for us, and I don't think we'd be so crude as to slap a 2 on top of it and just do Radical Rural 2, but we allow it to grow
Radical Rural 2.
Radical Rural 2.
Radical Rural 2, Rural Boogaloo.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't think so, but
Rural is back.
Rural is back. Rural or nothing.
A new hope. There you go.
Yeah. Well, Ollie, it has been very nice to record again.
Yeah, let's do this again.
Twice.
Yeah.
This is the second time.
If this conversation is corrupted, and
we'll do it. We'll do it as many times as we need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're committed.
Yeah, that's nice. All right. Thank you so much for listening as well. And we'll be back in 2 weeks with more episodes. See you next time.
See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Absolute Units. I've been Joe Vaughan, and my co-host has been Dr. Ollie Douglas. Absolute Units is made possible through Museums Partnership Reading, our Arts Council funded partnership with Reading Museum. We'll be back in 2 weeks' time with more episodes. If you've enjoyed this one, please leave us reviews, tell your friends. All of the help means a huge amount to us, and it helps us reach new listeners. We'll see you in 2 weeks.